Hi, this is going to be a video response for one of my viewers, Sean Cherry. He was commenting how sometimes he ended up losing interest when playing solo role playing games because obviously he was playing by himself, so I imagine that he enjoys that group energy. He was also thinking if it would be a good idea for him to keep a journal of the session. Maybe he would get into the experience that way. He was also asking if I kept a journal of my solo sessions. So there are a few interesting things to talk about here. I am going to give some tips and advice. Maybe some of these things will apply to your case, Sean. Maybe some others won't. I still hope that there will be some useful information in this video. Let's talk about the solitary aspects of solo RPGs. Undoubtedly, without a question, when playing with others, it's quite enjoyable. I love that back and forth, that enthusiasm that I send forwards and I get it bounced back at me, and it's very contagious. You create a sort of loop or feedback of enthusiasm and excitement when you're playing with your players. And when you play a solo role playing game, it's a different sort of experience or vibe, if you want to call it like that, because every sort of pseudo or artificial social interaction within a solo RPG, you're basically playing with aspects of yourself. That is, the non player characters, the enemies, the situations in the adventure. They are all like projections of yourself without having the input of other players, obviously. It's still quite enjoyable, but I will share my thoughts on how you can create a sort of social experience out of solo role playing games. You know, a funny thing is that between the transition period between high school and college, there were like 3 or 4 years where I simply couldn't find a group to play role playing games with. I couldn't create a group, and I didn't find at least what I would consider a good group. I think, based on my own experience, I think it's much better to be without a group than having a horrible RPG experience with the wrong group. And later on, when I actually got to play role playing games again in a group environment, then I found out about the Mythic Game Master emulator, and that would have been pretty useful during those years when I didn't have a group. So, well, what can you do? But I learned from my experience when I didn't have the chance to play role playing games with a group. I treasure a good group a lot more nowadays. In fact, currently I only have 2 players. I am only playing with 2 people. But because of those same ponderings, meditations on what it means to play solo and play with another group, I also think that there is a social aspect to solo role playing games, and I know a lot of solo RPG veterans out there are already familiar with this concept. I think the journaling aspect also plays quite heavily into this social aspect. When it comes to the question about me keeping a journal of my different solo sessions or solo adventures, in most cases I do keep a journal, especially, for example, in my sessions or campaigns rather of From the Ashes and the Golden Sky stories. Also, when I played the Quick and Classic session, the multi-part series of videos, I'm going to put those links in the description to this video. I needed to keep a somewhat meticulous journal of what transpired during the session, what happened during the game. Because otherwise I wouldn't have been able to create those videos. My recollection of the events would have been pretty flawed. And so when it comes to role-playing games that are somewhat complex and that you need to keep track of things, yes, Sean, I think it's quite advisable that you keep a journal, and perhaps you could get a bit more pulled into the experience. But definitely, the most important aspect, the social point of view of this, is that you could share those journals with others if you want. Even if you don't keep a blog, or if you're not creating YouTube videos, when you look at your notes and you revive or relive those experiences as you are paging through your journal. Oh, I remember that part during that session. And when you talk with others, you can give a somewhat accurate account of what happened during this or that adventure, during that campaign. So I think keeping a journal is an excellent way to bring some social aspects or a different sort of energy into your solo sessions. If you also, maybe you also enjoy, I don't know if it's your particular case, Sean, but there are players that need to feel as if they are in some sort of party or group within that fictional world. And obviously, it's not very easy to do when you are playing solo, but there are many artificial intelligence systems or engines out there. I'm going to put a link to my Abraham's Method series of videos. I talk about several of those in my recent From the Ashes session. I list several links. In almost all of my videos I have those links, but I keep adding tools and toolkits and whatnot that could enhance that AI aspect, so that when you encounter a non-player character, an enemy, you feel as if they are somewhat alive. You can trick yourself into thinking that they are actual sentient beings. When it comes to my Golden Sky Stories adventure, my series of videos, I actually enjoy quite a bit experiencing surprises and the unpredictable moments that happen because of the results when I am using the solo adventuring toolkit with the abridged AI system, because that's a very like a sample of the complete Flex AI guidebook. So I am always surprised with how some of the characters in the sessions react to different things, to different encounters. So I think it's a great idea if you're looking to further enhance that, just create a sort of artificial group experience. You could create 2 or 3 characters. You could play as one of those characters, and the other ones would be like the other players, and you could determine their actions using those AI systems. And I think it's great. You feel as if you sometimes need to adapt to what the AI is doing. The artificial intelligence sometimes takes some very less than optimal choices in battle situations or in social encounters, and then you need to rescue the situation, because that happens when you're playing with your group. Sometimes the other players, they do some what you would consider errors in combat, some tactical blunders or even strategic errors, and you need to enact some sort of damage control. And in social encounters as well, maybe they say something that is out of line, or that reveals something that should have been kept a secret, or something like that, a breach of protocol. And you need to, again, try to rescue the situation. Sometimes it's the other way around. Maybe you ended up committing an error or a mistake in combat or in a social situation, and the AI comes to the rescue because of the interpretation, because of the results. So that's another way to enhance that artificial social aspect of solo RPGs. But definitely when it comes to journals, it's very useful. I think you will get more into the experience. It all depends on the level of details that you want to handle. In some cases, you only want to write some key moments of the session. Maybe you had this battle and you do not need to describe everything that happens in every round. You could write something like, we encountered a troll, the battle was difficult, this character almost died, or if you're only playing as a single player character, I almost died, but I ended up using this magical item, and then I used this acid spell, or I used my torch to keep the troll from regenerating, and that's it. Just a general, some brief details. But if you're planning to create a blog, if you're planning to produce some videos or a podcast or whatever, then you need to add a bit more when it comes to details in the journal. There are some simple role-playing games and some role-playing games that lean heavier on the side of the rules that do not require a journal. For example, the Wild West solo RPG, The Drifter, it leans heavily on a win or lose situation, or rather sets of mechanics. You win the game if you become rich. You have a milestone that you need to reach in terms of obtaining money. But if your character dies, it's game over. That's how you lose the game. So in that case, you do not need to keep a journal. I have an ongoing solo game of The Drifter because it's so simple. You can play it during your breaks. And I only keep track of the position of the character in the hex map. The character sheet has some sections where you can write down ongoing events. Maybe you have some enemies that are chasing your character around the map. They are looking to capture your character or kill you because of the bounty on your head. Maybe there is an ongoing effect or a timed event on a certain place on the map, on the hex map. So you only need to keep track of those things. You do not need to write an entire journal of your session, or rather of your campaign. You could do that. There is nothing stopping you. It is quite enjoyable, in fact. So it all depends on the sort of RPG and the setting that you are playing, on the complexity, on how it leans heavily towards the rules, perhaps. But for example, if you are playing something potentially complex with a lot of social intricacies, Ars Magica, imagine with all of those characters. In Ars Magica, you usually control many player characters at the same time. You control the magicians or the wizards. You also control the knights, the servants. So you have an entire entourage or a group of non-player characters, a lot of them quite disposable. That's why they exist, so that they suffer the horrible death and fatal fates. When, yes, something goes wrong, those are the first characters to die. So yes, I would recommend, Sean, that you keep a journal and that you consider the possibility of keeping like a blog or creating some videos, because solo players, we love watching those videos and reading those blogs and all of that, because we learn from them. And perhaps you will teach something through your own content. Yes, you're going to learn from the content of other people, and you're also going to be producing your own stuff. So it's again like a feedback or a loop, that you are sharing your experience and you are learning things from other people's experiences. So I hope this video was helpful. And definitely it's part of the solo RPG experience, in my opinion, sharing your thoughts, some ideas or experiences of how things proceeded, what works and what doesn't work. And your experience would be quite different from the experience of other players. So like I said, it's always interesting. So thank you for watching this video. If Sean or anyone else has any other comments or questions, please let me know. I would also like to know if the solo players out there watching this video, if you keep journals, if sometimes you decide to just go with the flow and not keeping track of almost anything unless it is strictly necessary. And thank you so much to those of you that have been supporting the channel by sending drive-thru RPG gift certificates. If anyone else wants to further support the channel, the information on how to do that will be in the description below. Once again, thank you and see you later.